Well, now we come to the scary part of this whole endeavor about putting a new turnout in place on a perfectly reliable and functioning module. So all this track work works really well. This is as good as I can get it to line up with my lines that I had drawn, and you can see that my curve is a little bit off. I don't think it's going to make a huge amount of difference. I can probably tweak the track a little bit, and I can definitely bend these over because the turnout ends here. Originally what I had planned is for right where this insulating gap is, that this is where the turnout would end. If I bring that up here, that's not too bad of a placement for it. It pushes my siding a little further. The other thing to consider here is, one, where the turnout machine has to go below it, and where I have cross pieces or anything for feeders. So I can see right here I have a piece of foam core, and that means that about 2 inches away from the foam core is where the points will be. So let's take that off and look at the underside. Right on the edge of that thing, I can build up a little pad and put another piece of this material right here underneath there and make a little pad. And I think I'll have enough room right there. We don't have wires, feeder wires, or anything else in the way, and I will have room to run my control rods out here to the fascia. So I'll have to cut a hole and put my little caps and whatnot on there, but I think that'll be fine. So I think we'll next order of business is mark exactly where I want to cut the rails. The reason I wanted to put the switch in at this isolation gap was because you need every piece of track powered, and right here are the feeders for this piece of rail, and over here the feeders are on this piece. So if I chop it and make a short section here, then I've got to power this little piece of rail, which I really don't want to add any feeders, and the location's fine for that. So I think it's in place like that. So I've marked my turnout where I want to clip those rails at both ends. Marked the rail on the module where I want to clip it. A couple things to keep in mind is when you're going to add something like this, I want to be able to remove this last tie at the joint, so I made my mark right over the tie, and then I can break that out and trim it back, and I'll be able to get the rail joiner under there, and I'll slide a new tie underneath once I get everything hooked back up. Once I get this cut loose and get this track out of here, I will mark the location for the holes for the throw bar, and I'll go solder on my feeders for the turnout. Once I have the feeders on, I'll cut the isolation gaps for the frog, and we'll test it and then make sure that we've got the holes in the right place, and we'll glue this down. I do have to, before I do that, I do have to add some road bed and put a taper on this, because I want it to taper down from the main line down to the siding. So I'll get that in place. So right now we're going to cut some rails. There we go. So we got the end plastic tie out of here. I've got off the last bit of the rail that was nailed down on both ends, so there's enough room for a rail joiner to slip in there. This is not an electrical isolating gap. This was an expansion joint so that the tracks could have enough room to move down. And the alignment looks pretty darn good. I took some pictures, I'll post them. There's a little bit of a wiggle right here, but I don't think it's enough to cause any problems. And once I get this lined up here, right, so now the next step is to carefully mark where I want to put the feeder holes and drill the hole for the turnout machine for the throw bar actuator. And we'll put that in place. We'll put those all in place, mark them up. There we go. We got the road bed in. I use my little Dremel vibratory tool to plane down the cork. I need to sand it a little bit more. I can feel I got a little ridge right there, but worked pretty good. So we're all set to put the turnout, the Blue Point turnout control, and get all the feeders soldered on there and get all that stuff to make it operational. And then once we get that, we'll put the rest of the track out here for the spur. Alright, so now we've got the turnout in place. It's all tested, gaps cut, and we're got the wires below. We're ready to wire it up. I think it looks pretty good. Alright, Blue Point's in, track's laid, and we're to my favorite part of the hobby, waiting for glue to dry. So tomorrow I'll get this all wired up and we'll be good to go.